Welcome to another insightful episode of Me and My Health Up. The purpose of this podcast is to enhance and enlighten the well-being of others. I'm your host, Anthony Harcher. I'm a clinical nutritionist and lifestyle medicine specialist. This episode is on resilience with Graeme Cowan. How are you, Graeme?
Very well, thanks, Anthony.
Graeme helps leaders and teams to be more caring, resilient, and growth-oriented. In his early career, he worked in senior leadership positions with Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, and AT Kearney. In 2000, he went through a 5-year episode of depression that his psychiatrist described as the worst he had ever treated. He emerged from this crisis with a different view about how we can increase our resilience, our mood, our performance. He is described by the Australian Financial Review as the workplace resilience expert. He is the author of 4 books, including internationally acclaimed Back from the Brink. Recommend you read it, which has a testimonial from the former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair. And it's become the bestseller in China. So fantastic work there, Graeme. It's an amazing accomplishment. He recently co-founded the tech startup Factor C, which incorporates a range of e-learning resources, apps, and digital resources to help leaders build more resilient team. Graeme is also started a charity, which you're probably well and truly familiar with, Are You OK, in 2009, and is an active board member. So welcome, Graeme. How are you today?
I'm really well, thanks, Anthony. Great to be with you. I would just ask that, it was actually Gavin Larkin who started Are You OK? And I joined him pretty soon afterwards. But he was the founder. And it is wonderful just to see how that initiative has grown in reach and impact.
Oh, totally. I mean, I came across it in my corporate career, which was now many years ago, and I see it flourishing every year, and the brand getting stronger, and the messaging getting stronger amongst the community, and the question being more frequently asked, which is fantastic. So tell us a bit about how you arrived at what you are doing today, your journey to where you are. Yeah, so please share your story.
Yeah, well, I started off in marketing and worked in marketing for probably about 10 years with groups like Johnson and Johnson and Pfizer, and then I transitioned into human resources, and I recruited usually sales and marketing people into the healthcare sector. So it could be pharmaceutical companies, diagnostic companies. But also I was involved in recruiting key staff in hospitals and in the health department. And then finally I sort of evolved into a culture change specialist. And so for about 18 months, I led a group that was, endeavoring organizations to make more constructive cultures. And then I left Morgan & Banks, who I was with at that time, and went to AT Kearney. And I was a vice president in their executive search division. And it was really that time where I had a really bad depressive episode. The market turned down and I really crashed. And I was out of work for 5 years. And, my marriage broke down. I became estranged from my kids, and it was pretty dire there for quite a while. Luckily, my parents really supported me and helped me, and I did gradually come back. And so it was a combination of starting to exercise, reconnecting with family and friends. It was also beginning to meditate, and it began a very long ritual of meditation, and which I continue to today. And then I think probably a really key thing was then transitioning to write my first book, which was called Back from the Brink. And it was when I interviewed other people who'd been through tough times and found out how they came out of it and what the difference was, and I launched that at the Black Dog Institute. And John Brogden, the former opposition leader, launched it for me. And I had some well-known people there, including Jeff Gallop, former WA Premier, a couple of gold medal swimmers like John Conrads and Petria Thomas, and the guru or the icon of the art world, Margaret Olley. And I think because it had some well-known people there, it did, very well. There was lots of publicity, lots of inquiries. And after the launch, over the next sort of month or so, I ended up doing about 200 interviews. And that led to my next book. And then I was asked then to speak, often in regional areas, country areas. And I'm from the country originally, so I really resonated and enjoyed that. And then probably in the last sort of 5 or 6 years, I've really evolved to going back to the corporate environment, and in particular, helping leaders to build personal and team resilience. And if you get the resilience right and get self-care right, you get growth. And I know that's a real theme in your podcast, Anthony, and it certainly, your message really resonates with me as well.
Yeah, so let's switch to this resilience that you mentioned. So, what is meant by resilience, and how can we be more resilient? So, what is some of your tips that you share in your talks, and what's helped you, particularly from I guess the episodes of Back from the Brink?
Yeah, I decided, look, in the process of writing my book, and I've written 5 books now. I've really been very, very interested in mood, and if we are just victims of our mood or we have some control. And what I found was examining the work of Professor Sonia Lieber-Mirsky, she wrote a book called The How of Happiness. And when she reviewed 400 peer-reviewed studies, it showed that our mood, or what psychologists call positive affect, is affected by 3 things. The first thing is our genetics, and that contributes 50%, a big chunk. The next biggest is our intentional actions, what we choose to do each day, and that is 40%. And then the events that happen in our lives is 10%. And so that was a real, I guess, insight for me that there are things that I can do that boost my mood. And after a lot of reading, I really decided that there was 3 outcomes I was seeking from life, and that was vitality, which is physical health, intimacy, which is emotional health, and prosperity, which is contribution health. So with vitality, it's things like exercising well, eating well, resting well, sleeping well. Intimacy is really making sure that I have really strong friendships, and both, in a work environment and also in a private environment. And I've done a lot to sort of nurture those relationships. And the third element is prosperity, and the outcome that you're seeking there is contribution energy. And I really do find a lot of fulfillment in the work that I do, and with what's happened in my own business, but also just seeing how Are You Okay has grown in impact. And so I tell people when I talk, you should be acting like a VIP. And acting like a VIP means that you do things each day that top up your vitality glass of well-being, your emotional glass of well-being, and your prosperity glass of well-being. And I really find that if I really do this consistently each day, that it does make me a lot more immune to low moods. It doesn't mean I don't have tough times, of course, but I'm much less down than I am up now. And that's really been my real discovery. And of course, I really like to encourage other people to to discover that as well.
And so, just your tips on this vitality bucket or cup, so to speak. So, what do you do? I mean, you did mention there was, the resting, the sleeping, exercising. Can you share any more specific tips that have really helped you around boosting your vitality?
Yeah, I use a little app which is called Streaks, and it costs about $5 from the Apple and the Android store, and allows you to set up daily rituals to follow. And so on my daily rituals, I have 20 minutes meditation in the morning, 40 minutes exercise, and then deciding what are the most important things I'm going to be doing in the day. Who am I catching up from my green zone tribe, my group that helps me stay in a positive mood. And then I finish the day also with a 10-minute meditation. And it's a very, very good interface that this has. You just, you just, once you set those things up, you put your, I'll just, you put your thing you want to do there. So whether it's meditation and stuff, and after you do it, you put your thumb on it and it does this circle and it shows the number of consecutive days that you've done a particular thing. So that's the way that I've tried to really make it a ritual. But it's also just realizing that when I do these things, I'm better myself. And, we do need to have this mindset that self-care isn't selfish. We can't care for others if we don't look after our own well-being.
Absolutely. And you touched on your intimacy bucket in terms of what you do for your vitality in the morning is, who are the people that keep me in the green zone, lift me up and help take me forward. And so that tribe, if you got any tips of how people can create their green zone tribe and what you do in order to nurture this tribe and grow within it.
Yeah, I once read a book, a very, very good book called Friendimacy. And the woman who wrote that, I think, summarized it incredibly well. She said that to really build these strong relationships, we need to have three things. And the first thing is positivity. So you feel positive after being with a person and they feel positive. So, that's the first tick. And obviously that's really, really important. The second one is consistency. It was really her finding in the research, this doesn't happen unless there is consistency, because you get to know each other much better and can really, really build on that. And the third element, and this is, I think, the real tough one for a lot of men, is vulnerability. And this is actually, where you can be vulnerable and say, look, I've had a really shitty day, things aren't going well, or and be able to just be really authentic with what's happening with you. And I've been fortunate enough to build, probably about 4 or 5 mates that fall into that category. And when I do have a setback, I am able to really engage with them and just say, look, I'm not doing too great at the moment. If you want to help, let's go for a walk and have a bit of a chat. And so it's quite a good trifecta to think about, positivity, consistency, and vulnerability.
Yeah, it's I agree with that third point around vulnerability, particularly with men. And I work for I volunteer my time for a charity called the Banksia Project, and it's to help men share and express their vulnerability and to feel that peer-to-peer support. The Banksia Project call it the gym for the mind, essentially, and it's that I guess that safe space where they can go and share what's going on and then feel that they're not being judged and they've got the back of the peers around them and they're not being told what to do. So it's really the peer-to-peer support is other people just sharing what's worked for them. And I find that model certainly works really well, and it achieved great results for people that particularly what's focused on men that struggle with that expressing the vulnerability and showing what's perceived as weakness, but really it's a strength, isn't it, if we can be vulnerable.
Yeah, and I think men do have a potential to be really vulnerable when things happen. For example, if a marriage breaks down or a male loses his job, often men joke about their partner or their wife being the social secretary and they organizing things, and when a relationship breaks down, it's often the whole social aspect breaks down as well. And that's why I think it is really important for men to have those individual relationships, and likewise also with men. And things are changing, of course, but traditionally men have been the breadwinner, and a lot of their self-worth is placed around their work, and a lot of their time is at work. And so often if they lose their job or go through a restructure or something, they also lose their social connection. They lose their sense of identity in terms of not working anymore, but they also often lose their whole social group because it often revolves around the workplace.
Yeah, and certainly, you experienced all of that firsthand. The job, not having a job, and then secondly, the marriage breakdown, and then the distancing with the kids, and then you mentioned that your parents were really a key contributor to really bringing you back from the brink. And I was thinking, what was it, and how did they go about that? Because there'll be certainly listeners out there that know people in this situation or really struggling, and often think, how do I approach the subject, or what's going to really help bring them, to life, so to speak, when you're so down. And as you said, men withdraw, and you don't have that social secretary anymore. So I'm just wondering if there was anything that you can remember that really was a game changer for you around how your parents approached the subject, or how they provided that support to help you.
Well, they really provided unconditional support and really believed in me when I'd lost faith in myself. That was a really important component. I actually, because when my marriage broke down, I had to move out of the family home, and I actually went back to live with my parents in foster because I just didn't feel that I could look after myself. And so it was very, very regular contact. It was belief in me and that I could come back. And it was just patience. I went through lots of rocky periods, and they were patient. And if we want to help someone, just saying that you care, that you're here to listen, can be very, very helpful. And in the case of men, it's often better to, suggest doing something like, whatever is important to you and that person. It could be going fishing together, or walking, or jogging, or having breakfast or a coffee, but to have a little bit of an occasion around it, and then the conversation becomes the byproduct of that.
Yeah, and you mentioned that key thing was the time with them, and as you said, they will, when they're ready, they'll come out with what they need to come out with, and but it's you being patient, being with them, and as you also mentioned, that thing around the intimacy bucket or cup is that consistency. So you're always going to be there for them, no matter what the circumstances. So yeah, so I really love that, those 3 points around finding that green zone tribe. So that first being positivity, lift you up, that consistency. So being consistent in the relationship, and the third one, which is escaping my mind now,
The vulnerability.
vulnerability. That's it, the key one that we just discussed. So yeah, great way to break down how to build your own tribe to keep you in the green zone. So I'm just thinking in terms of building resilience teams. You do a lot of work with leaders around this, and we've spoken a lot about the individual and how the individual can improve their resilience. What does a leader do? And when I say leader, like a parent is a leader to their children. So I'm talking in that broad context around leadership. So yeah, really keen to find, well, I'm personally a parent, and how can I improve my children's resilience, because they're my team, and yeah, and likewise there'll be other people out there leading teams in organizations. What can they do?
Yeah, I think it is really worth thinking about. One of the most important things is to practice self-care. When you are a leader of a family, or a leader in the workplace, or leader in a charity, and by practicing self-care, it's been shown that it has a dramatic impact to people around them. It's not just about your own well-being, but it actually flows onto other people. And there's been research in the workplace that shows that if a leader practices self-care and supports a well-being initiative, it increases the engagement in the team, it increases the commitment in the team, it increases the length of time someone stays in the team or wants to stay in a team. So just doing that is really important. Once that's under control, there's some things that we just need to think about. And I'll talk first of all in the workplace, but you'll see it applies very much in a family setting as well. And that's to ask yourself, are we connected? Are we as a family, are we as a work group connected? And what that means is that there is lots of interaction and we're seeking to have an outcome there of we belong. And it's a basic human need to have a belonging to a group or a tribe. And so, I was actually interviewing a senior leader this morning, and she oversees 3,500 people in main roads and transport in Queensland. And she said that when the whole COVID thing happened, she really tried to ramp up the connection across the group. And she did things like, have Q&As every month where everyone could ask a question. There are ideas and things put in place that encourage that getting together. And in the family situation, it could be, doing things together, having a movie night or, going on a walk together, and just thinking that through. The second thing is having safety, and I'm primarily talking about psychological safety. And what that means is that you're comfortable being yourself. You can be yourself, you can be authentic, but you can also try new things and be encouraged to try new things. And know that if things don't work out, well, you tried, what can we learn from it? It's not the end of the world. And so that's the second element. And the third component is really, do we have a shared future? And that could be in the workplace. What's our priorities as a team? What are we going to do? What are we going to do differently in the year ahead? But likewise, that can also be planned with a family. And, what holidays we're going to take this year? What are we going to try that we haven't tried before? How can we plan a year where we get done all the things that we hope to do? And so, yeah, those elements. And obviously, there's a lot of depth that can be gone into each of those, but it's a good way of thinking of it. And I really saw this first in a great book, which is called The Culture Code. And it was by Daniel Coyle. And he examined a whole lot of really high performing organizations and teams like, Google and the Navy SEALs, elite sports teams, et cetera. And that's what they identified from that, is that these high performing work teams are almost like family. People, they have each other's back. They enjoy their time together and really strive to have a sense of enjoyment and fun as well. They work hard, they have clarity around what they do, but one of the things they often describe, and I often do this in my talks, is how ask people to reflect on, what were the qualities of the best team they've been part of, or a great team they've been part of. And people say, we had each other's back, we had common goals, we had complementary strengths, we enjoyed ourselves, we had fun. And that they're really important ingredients. And in fact, Google have shown that it's the number one number one predictor of a high performing team is where there is high psychological safety.
And we've certainly, witnessed that through COVID. You did raise COVID, and it's important because we're still going through it at this point in time. Was around that, increased tribalism. So people were, looking for who they could connect with and relate to, and there was tribes popping up everywhere, and then the other thing I observed was, you know, great leaders really shone during the crisis, and the poor leaders just went downhill in the spiral. And the ones that led with empathy, so really led with the heart and the people's interest, first and foremost. And I'm just thinking of, the trends and, what's happening in society around, like, well, particularly pre-COVID, and it's sort of picking up again now that we're emerging from COVID, was this, this drive for productivity, and increase well, the rapid rise of technology. So, we see technological changes just coming, and AI. There's a lot of talk around AI, job losses associated with that, and particular industries wiped out, and so we're really entering a phase. I guess, I mean, we always have through civilization, but there's this technological influence that is really driving this next phase, and there is that apprehension about what does the future hold. Am I in the industry where will I still have a job? And I'm thinking, your work, the work that you do, is more important than ever, really, or certainly in my time, to help navigate us through this time. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, what are you seeing, challenges with respect to this, and the way in which us as humans can really move through it? And I think you've mentioned a few of them, and it's fine to reiterate some of these key points, but I'm really keen to get your insight in this area of rapid change, and, how do we navigate through with resilience?
Yeah, and the last 12 months have certainly been incredibly volatile, and with that volatility, there's also been, complexity and ambiguity, and the work from home has really suited some people. Like, some people love it. Other people miss the connection in the office. The catching up for a coffee, bumping into each other around the office, and that sort of thing. And then there's people in the middle that, ideally would like to have a bit of both. And funnily enough, I surveyed my database to ask what they would prefer going forward. And by far the most popular, which I think was about 55%, was half and half, working from home but also working at work. And I think increasingly that companies will have to find some sort of medium that allows the social interaction as well as being able to work remotely. There's no doubt that stress levels, grew substantially last year. And, there were lots of stresses and strains, but the biggest thing that people found difficult was the uncertainty, and having no control over many of the things that were happening to us. Like, with literally a couple of COVID cases, the whole state shuts down. It was just quite, extraordinary. Nothing like this has ever happened in our lifetime. And so the thing that I really encourage people to do is focus on the things you can control. And as I mentioned at the start, 50%, so 40% of our mood is contributed by things we choose to do each day. And so making sure that you do have time when you're catching up with people that are good for you, making sure that you have time for exercise and having good rest and good sleep. But also, thinking about the workplace as well, because there's lots and lots of little things. But in my webinars in particular, I really try to encourage people to think about what are the big things you can do that are both important and not necessarily urgent, but that could really be really helpful for assisting longer term. Always the important and the urgent get done, but really making time for the important and the non-urgent. So to give you an example of that, I've really just been thinking about, how do I scale what I do? There's only so many live events you can go to, and that went down quite a bit in 2020. But then I was able to ramp up webinars, but then also online learning, and creating learning programs when people can access what they need to learn and make that really accessible. So that's an example, I guess, of, it was hard work to do it, and it wasn't urgent, but I just decided that longer term, that was a really great thing to do. And I was very fortunate to form a partnership with Brendan Carter, who's an e-learning specialist. And so we've just created a range of products which can be found at factorc.com.au. And you just see on there's learning products that show you how to reach out to others, ask, are you okay, and guide them to the help they need. Really be very, there's specific help sheets like, how to find a good mental health savvy GP, how to prepare for a psychological appointment, how to assist someone who's away from work, etc., etc. So, yeah, that was meaningful work, and it doesn't happen over time, but ultimately, it's quite fulfilling producing things like that really expand reach and impact.
Yeah, you touched on two key important areas, which is that proactiveness and working in that prevention space and really allocating time to, as you said, it's not, it's very important, but non-urgent. And that is very much our health generally. If we're well, we need to, in order to stay well, we need to keep investing into it. And as you said, it's, filling up that vitality glass. So yeah, I couldn't agree more around that proactiveness and working in that preventative space. And I really love this concept that you've shared with us multiple times, is this contribution and how that improves mood. And yeah, you've really found fulfillment by doing a lot in this space. And I can see it's really helped you and continues to fulfill you, doesn't it? I sense it. Every time you talk, you're always talking about how you're contributing more to society and helping people to be more resilient and helping them avoid going to the brink.
Yeah.
Um,
And if people are interested in taking the first step here, I also have something called a self-care snapshot. And what it is, it asks 5 questions in vitality, 5 questions in intimacy, 5 questions in prosperity. And so you can identify which is your emptiest glass. And then there's also a tool for planning the week ahead. How do you make sure that you have a focus on things that you may not be doing at the moment? And I never suggest that people try and take on too much. Just take on one new ritual, whether it's walking 40 minutes a day, whether it's resolving to meditate for 10 minutes at the end of the day, but to actually make that change. And as I mentioned, it's a free resource which is available on my website at graemecowan.com.au/self-care. And so people might, just really see where they could be missing out and how they're missing out, and they need to perhaps look at addressing that in some way.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. That first step is awareness, and that tool that you share, which I'll share in the show notes, creates that awareness within the individual. Because, when you're busy with work and life, and you can, really get, I guess, pulled in certain directions. And whereas what this tool does is really help people to reflect on, where they're spending their energy and whether there's a cup that's becoming more and more empty. And as you said, they need to start topping up that cup. Yeah, I'll absolutely share those resources that you shared shared with us on Factor C, as well as that self-care assessment tool. So yeah, really appreciate your wisdom that you've shared with us, your time, because I know you're very busy with everything you do. And, me reading out that bio, you just accomplished so much. And I'm in awe of what you've been able to achieve and now give back in a big way. I really appreciate you giving your time to my listeners, so that they can really, improve, so that they can further develop their self-care, their resilience, and become, as you said, more resilient in these uncharted waters that we constantly, now encountering more with these changes, these rapid changes, and then focusing on the things that they can control.
Yeah, very much so. And I've really appreciated the chance to speak to you as well, Anthony, and congratulations on the initiatives you have in place, and sharing what you've learned and what other people have learned. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Hi, you're so welcome, Graeme. And Do you have any other concluding comments you'd like to share? Like anything that you've felt that I haven't covered, or that's on top of your
Always
mind?
on stage or on webinars, my sign off is to be caring. And so that's about self-care, crew care, and red zone care, which is helping someone who could be struggling be helpful. And so if we're helpful, we're useful, and we'll always be in demand. And then the final thing is go for the growth zone. And that means always endeavoring to go a little bit outside our comfort zone, try new things, learn, and yeah, it keeps us alive and vital when we learn new stuff.
Fantastic. I love that conclusion. Yeah, with that, without any further ado, I'll wrap it up there. And thank you again. And for listeners, if you really like this episode, please share it with others, and they can benefit. So the more people that hear about Graeme's excellent work, the better we are as a society. So please like and share, and get the word out there. So thanks, Graeme. Thanks again.
Thanks, Anthony.
Cheers. Bye.